How do you feel when your kid brings back a girlfriend slash boyfriend? How do you decide whether you like them or not? My daughter, 13, wanted me to meet her first real boyfriend. I was nice and pleasant, but I knew it wouldn't last cause he was all looks and no brains. Of course, as junior high relationships go, it was about a 2-month ordeal. I think all parents should try and be cordial, unless the person feels like a serial killer or something. I'm gonna warn you that when I was 13 I also got my first real boyfriend. Lasted 7 years. As someone who deeply regrets that I lost my virginity at 13, please educate her about sex now that she's at an age where she's interested in guys. I'm sure my parents never thought I would be having sex, but I was. Thankfully, I never got pregnant or had an STDs, and obviously the guy wasn't in it just for sex, but it really screwed up my views on relationships, sex, and love. Sorry, I know it's horribly off topic, but I feel it is my duty as a bad decision maker to help others to not make the same bad decision. I've told all my kids that they should not have sex until they are comfortable saying out loud exactly what they want. It's a simple maturity test, but I also put it to them as my opinion of the only way most people can enjoy sex early on. Also, I always said, don't get anyone pregnant instead of goodbye at drop-offs. Remember to tell them how they can avoid pregnancy if you haven't already. A lot of unwanted pregnancy happened due to lack of information. I was an early bloomer, bringing my boyfriend home by 14. I'm not sure parents can really say anything active to you when you've got a huge crush and are playing grown up by figuring out how to be a girlfriend slash boyfriend at that age. My parents just made sure I was still focusing on school, and they made an effort to get to know the guy. And when he couldn't hold a conversation with my dad, even though my dad was being nice, I realized it was embarrassing and that the guy was dumb on my own. I knew about sex and STDs from the internet, but what mattered more was that my parents treated him with respect, and I realized he wasn't right for me because he couldn't keep up with us in conversation. He was a nice enough guy. We broke up after a couple of months. I had a string of boyfriends, and none lasted longer than a year at that age. I think the best thing parents can do is make an honest effort to get to know the boyfriend slash girlfriend so that you can have a real conversation with your kid about them when things come up. Honestly, the whole virginity is sacred thing is probably one of the most damaging things. You put too much false worth into something that's just a natural human function slash instinct. Considering the lack of experience, your first time is probably not gonna be the best. And that's a problem, since it can lead to feelings of regret and loss because of all that false worth we put into virginity. Now I don't know if a bad experience is why you have regret, but just some food for thought. Exactly. I felt horrible for months after I lost my virginity. I didn't tell my mother until a year later when she asked me. Hell, I still haven't told my mother. Granted, I'm sure she's figured it out by now on account of the grandkids. That you've discovered the secret of parthenogenesis in humans? I agree. I understand the regret of having sex at a young age, but to only think of it in terms of one's virginity is weird. I'm glad that, despite my parents' best effort, I never bought into the sacred virginity idea, and I have zero regrets about losing it. I will also add that I too got my first "real boyfriend" at 14. It's now a decade later, and we are planning our wedding. So be careful with that one. But it only worked out because he's a really great guy. I got my first real BF, and it lasted 13 years. We broke up recently. We are at different stages in life. He wanted to focus on his career and going back to school, which is fine. I wanted to go back to school, but I want a family. I want my son to have siblings before he gets much older. I don't want to wait until my ex is done with school and makes as much money as he wants. Oh, he's also dating his just a friend now. Just gonna put it out there, it really could have been just a friend whilst you were together, and she just took her chance now that he's single. I wouldn't put that against him blindly. It may not be a blind accusation slash feeling, but just putting it out there. I don't know your family, but is it possible that you get defensive when they have tried to tell you what they don't like about him? Tangential rant. We pretty much hate my friend's husband, but she is so defensive of him. We just have to change the subject so we can still be friends, because we can't listen to her claim things about him that we know are not true, like that he is smart and ambitious and kind. He's really boring, while somehow at the same time, he's obnoxious and rude and shamelessly attention seeking. Like bragging about how much he drank last night in a first conversation with a new person. Kind of boring and obnoxious. Is always getting laid off, etc. I don't think he hurts her or anything. It's just really annoying to be around him, because he is basically one big stereotype of an insecure toxic masculinity crisis. Obviously I'm not accusing Yosu of being like this, but the reason we can't talk to my friend about why we don't like him is because she's so defensive of him, and the issues are so obvious that it's hard to even begin to talk about it without coming off as extremely judgmental, and maybe we are being judgmental, but I don't feel bad about it in this case. We care a lot about her and she's great, so we just don't talk about him, and we have lots of girls only nights. So we can spend some time with her without him there being obnoxious. I gave my daughter's on/off boyfriend a chance. Tried to like him. He seemed a bit manipulative to begin with, but I chalked it up to being 15. Then she attempted suicide while Snapchatting with him because he was telling her how selfish he thinks she is. All while she was already arguing with her best friend over him. He didn't reach out to me or her stepdad at all. Just told all her friends that she was crazy. Started dating someone else while she was still in NICU. Then messaged a bunch of crap to her older sister calling her a slut and shit. I'll bury his ass in the backyard if he ever tries to get back with her. When my oldest daughter introduced her first serious boyfriend, he was an awkward kind of guy, was pretty unremarkable, but he got super animated about topics that interested him. I had a chat with him about my daughter. He got animated. They've been married for 9 years. Good guy, works hard, is a staunch advocate for his wife, and I love his smile when he looks at their kids. My oldest son's first girlfriend was not an emotional investment. He was willing to make she was pretty, but that was it. I scolded him. He got defensive, almost married her, but she made the mistake of asking my son about my money. About a year later he brought home a beautiful talented woman with an electric personality and more self-confidence than even my cocksure eldest, and I was never more proud of him than when he took that dive. Their kids are incredible. Great couple. My second daughter just introduced us to a college friend of hers. He seems like a decent person. He's young, but he's got a head on his shoulders, and seems able to conduct himself politely. I'll need more time to figure it out. My youngest son had a high school sweetheart girlfriend that's now his college girlfriend. When I first met her she was 9, so I'm pretty enamored with her. Her parents have babysit and house sat for us, and they're all good people. My youngest daughter has introduced me to a girlfriend from her trade school recently. Pretty sure she has been dating her for a couple years. She's angry, contrary, and bitter. Under all that baggage it's hard to tell, but I'm hoping that my home can be a place where she can just let whatever angers her so much disappear for a while and I can find out who she actually is. I've asked a good friend of my daughter's if there's ever been any signs of violence, as that's my only real concern, but so far it seems fine on that front. My youngest has always been a bit more subdued and contemplative than my others, so I'm hoping that whatever bitterness is in her girlfriend's life doesn't hurt her. This relationship is the most concerning one to me because my daughter is a very sensitive person and I fear for her happy cheerful spirit. This is a tough subject. My daughter started dating a guy when she turned 17. He said he had 2 jobs. He said he came from a rough childhood, so he didn't like to talk about his family. He told us they were refugees from Haiti who moved to the US to better their lives. He said his family one day just decided to move from our state to the other side of the country. We all would ask questions, but he would just shut up. It was troubling, but he was polite, seemed kind. He called me mom. He was visiting every day. Then my daughter turned 18, and they moved in together. I felt it was too soon, but she thought she was in love. He was still his nice quiet self in front of our family. My daughter began telling me he didn't want to cook or clean and just wanted to play PS4 while she worked full time. I told her to keep talking to him about how she was becoming unhappy. He would make her promises, but continue to do what he was doing. She worked graveyards, so he would say he worked during the day and she'd believe him. She had a puppy who he agreed to look after and clean up for as a shared responsibility. He wasn't doing this at night, when she was at work, or when he was off. She had an opportunity to go to Disneyland for a week as a babysitter for her little cousins. After making sure he was okay with it, she went. She got home a day early to surprise her dog on his birthday. She found him lethargic with no food or water, and no aircon in the hot as weather. She broke up with her boyfriend then and there. She said her dog was like her son and she wasn't going to stand for that type of neglect. I picked her up, and her ex-boyfriend followed her out. He was polite, telling me to not let her leave him. I told him to give it a few days. After we left, I could tell her voice was hoarse. She said they had a loud argument. The next morning she asked her dad and I to take her back to her apartment so they could talk. She could get some of her stuff and leave on good terms with him. I asked if we could go in with her. She said, "No mom, I'm an adult, I got this." I jokingly asked if she was going to take her dog to protect her. She said no, as long as he's with you, I know he will be well taken care of. Her words made me joke with her and ask if she was going to run away or something. She just laughed and called me silly. She kept in contact with me and at noonish asked me to get her. We went and there was no answer. It sounded like the apartment was empty. We called the cops. They did a wellness check 5 hours later. After we begged and begged, we had searched everywhere and called everyone she knew, but they both had disappeared. We kept going back to the apartment hoping wherever they went they had come back, but still nothing. A neighbor brought me a chair to sit to wait outside the apartment until she came. I sat staring at one point on the wall. As long as I sat there, I had a fear so primal and deep it slowed down my thought process. Another neighbor came to me and said she heard we were looking for my daughter. What she said next made my blood run cold. She said, "I saw your daughter around 12:30 or 1. Her boyfriend was kicking her and dragging her by the hair into the apartment." I called 911 again because I knew whatever we found in the apartment was not something we would want to see. The 911 operator didn't believe me, even after I let her talk to the neighbor. We broke the window and I climbed in. I found my precious, beautiful, sweet, amazing, loving daughter surrounded in blood. She had been strangled and stabbed in the throat. The spot where I had been staring all day was the spot my daughter was killed at on the other side of the wall. He had killed her before we got there, and she bled out in minutes. The kind guy who called me mom was really a monster underneath it all. He has no remorse. I was in disbelief and felt a misunderstanding had happened. I went and saw him once. He turned himself in 2 days later. He said he did it because he couldn't live without her. Never let your loved ones be alone when they are breaking up or going to meet someone they just broke up. Learn from the biggest mistake of my life. I'd do anything to rewind time and save my daughter. It's about respect. If they are treating my kid, spouse or myself like shit in our own home, how do you think I'll feel? Some politeness goes a long way, and of course it's a two-way street. Chances are you also know your kids well enough to notice if this person is a total 180 from their usual friends or previous or whatever. Sometimes a red flag, but not always. You've likely had experience with them bringing over someone from the wrong crowd, and this is honestly not that different. It's all about how you see them treat others, but since they are probably teenagers, you can't read too much into things like what they want to do when they grow up and so on. I'd hope by your 40s or whatever you'd know enough about how to tell if someone's head is screwed on properly or not. It's still important to let them explore and learn the odd rough lesson on their own. You constantly weighing in on how much you disapprove of their only drives them further to them. Although you don't want to be too late to interfere if things are getting a little too out of control, like that dad who killed his daughter's boyfriend for getting her into hard drugs and ruining her life. Don't let it get there. At the end of the day, no one can get them to break up except themselves. They have to learn what's best for them and figure it out on their own. Don't meddle too much.